I'm very excited to introduce Anisha Kuhn and her culminating project, Making the Ineffable Effable. And this is an incredible contribution to the field, in my view. Not only is it an incredibly rich project and document creation of it, but the combination of the telepathic letters that she wrote to her son, who had crossed over, what I call cross-dimensional communication, along with her experiences, her transpersonal experiences explained, which illuminates so many different elements of the transpersonal. It's beautiful illuminations of many different transpersonal elements, and then research woven in as well that also illuminates and supports these personal and very deeply inner and cross-dimensional experiences. And at the same time, she created a series of mandalas throughout this process. But a large part of the project is Letters to Sona, which is her son's soul name. And these letters are a treasure of cross-dimensional communication in a wide variety of ways. I mean, I just can't say enough about how rich this is and how worth reading it is. But thank you for being here for the presentation of this great work.
Thank you, Jules. Thank you so much. It has been such a blessing to work with you, have your company through this. Hello, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for being with me in this presentation called Making the Ineffable Effable, Coming to Terms with Numinous Transpersonal Experiences. I am working on my slides here. Okay, we might have to be in the realm of patience. Okay, this isn't the one either. Okay, there we go. Okay, I am so new at this. Thank you for bearing with me. Experiences that are profound, that open us to something beyond the five physical senses and the reality that we've been taught. Experiences that are hard to put into words because we don't have language for the reality that they open. What are they? They come in many different forms. They might be a telepathic experience. They can be a huge near-death experience. It can be a peak experience, a nature experience, a mystical experience, a channeling experience. So many different ones. Why are they ineffable? Because we don't have that language. In our Western society, we don't have a lot of spiritual language as a part of our culture, or a lot of spiritual knowledge. So it's like, what just happened? What do we call them? I found this so interesting. There are so many names for them, almost as many names as experiencers in the field of transpersonal psychology. Ray White called them exceptional human experiences, and transpersonal psychology embraces that name. And I was trying to find one that felt like it really fit my own. It felt like a part of my process of coming to terms with and peace with my ineffable experiences. So I chose to put two together, numinous and transpersonal. Numinous, I love that Robert Otto wanted a word that was holy and sacred, but not religious. And that's what numinous, came up with numinous. And Carl Jung adopted that as the term he liked. And then transpersonal, just being able to get past your own little self and connect to a greater reality. That was why I chose that. And I really feel like everyone should maybe make up their own term for their ineffable experiences. What do we do with these experiences? Talk about them openly? Woo. Now that's scary, right? And get judged, maybe that you're crazy, maybe that you're just way out there. And who do you talk about it with? And how do you figure out if they're safe to talk about it with? Let's see. Or there's the good old repress and deny. And oh man, that can be a real relief for a little while. And then with time, because we're really stuffing them back into the unconscious where they came from. And they're really pretty much a gift from the unconscious. So that's not going to sit well for a long time. I had an aha moment with last summer, right before this Culminating project, with my family. We meet in San Diego each year with my two grown-up kiddos and their partners and my grandson and my husband. And we were just talking around dinner, and I think it was my son-in-law asked something about energy that is not in our highest good. And I didn't say a word. I think I even said, I don't know. And I had this moment of, oh my gosh, not only am I telling him I don't know anything about the spiritual world, I'm believing it myself. I truly, for a moment, realized I was denying and repressing so much that I had disconnected from this time of incredible NTEs around my son's death. And he was so involved in them. And to know that I had almost maybe gotten boxes and packed them up with all my NTEs and stuffed them down into the cellar in my unconscious. And there they are, getting dusty. And I'm pretending like they never happened. That kind of blew me away because I felt myself away from my authentic and true self. Also, it meant I'm stepping off the road towards transformation, towards becoming my true self and living my soul's journey. And that was really my moment. And I happened to be in Jules' class, Becoming a Teacher of Dream Work, and which is a time of being very close to your unconscious mind because you're tuned into your dreams. And I was experiencing Jules as a teacher. She really holds space for each person's journey. And I felt that already. And so it hit me, oh my gosh, maybe I can figure out a way to process these in a culminating project. And maybe Jules would be my mentor. So she said yes, and I started that process. And I picked one, goes with this second quote here. The act of putting an experience into words creates a structure or organization for it, leading to assimilation of the experiences. And what I first was going to do was write a creative mystical tale. And so that is going to end up changing, but the rest, the hypothesis is the same, that if I am able to write things out and explore and ask my questions, I had so many questions. I still have a lot of questions. I still have a lot of NTEs to investigate over time, but I got through a lot of them through writing, research. It was an amazing experience to be able to ask a question and have the time and the focus to go and answer it for myself. And just reflection and being able to, and this feels so important to me, and I'm going to go to my next slide here. So once you have your hypothesis, and I had my hypothesis and what I'm going to do now, I wanted a lot of support. So I had Jules, who I knew I was going to be sharing these NTEs with, who I haven't talked to beyond maybe the people in my family closest to me. And the number 3, the divine ally, came a little bit later. So I had started the first semester. I was going to write this creative mystical tale. So I was researching for it to prepare for it. And I was sharing in my discussion post each week with Jules some of my NTEs. And I was getting such lovely responses back, like they were the most normal thing in the world and how wonderful and lots of space for them. And I started to realize, oh my gosh, I'm feeling different already about these. And I could feel all the shame and embarrassment that I had around mine just lifting. And at the same time, I was also feeling different about my son and my son's death. So already things were happening just because I had someone to share with who understood what NTEs are and could give me support and acceptance. So I went in, I had a thyroidectomy in the middle of the first semester. And I don't know if they took my thyroid and a block in my 5th chakra, but I came out of that just wanting to speak my mind. And I also came out of it wanting to write letters to Sona, my son. I had started a tale. I got just a little ways in it, but I had on a discussion post, I decided I would try it. I would write to my son, to Sona. So I wrote a letter or 2, I think, that I turned into Jules that week. And it felt so right. I wanted to keep writing letters about my NTEs and about his death, which had really surprised me. I didn't realize that I still had so many questions around grief. And Jules was so supportive. Yes, got to follow your process, follow your gut. And sure, you can change this and write letters to your son. So I realized what I had done is to create support in 2 dimensions. I had Jules in the physical and Sona in the spiritual. And I just started writing letters. Sometimes a couple of days, sometimes I'd be reflecting and a few days would pass, but I wrote a lot of letters. Not all of them are in my project. But then I would reflect on them and I'd research my questions. And then I'd write a little segment that went into my project after each letter. And I shared them with Jules. And I kept doing that until I had that sense that it was time to stop writing and then to reflect on the whole. And there's a little more to that process I'll talk about later. An important part of this for me was mandala drawing. And on each slide, there'll be a mandala that I made. And this was inspired by Carl Jung and learning how he made a mandala every day while he was a commander of a prisoner of war camp from 1916 to 1918. And I love this quote. It kind of is my guiding quote. I began to understand that the goal of psychic development is the self. There is no linear evolution. There's only circumambulation of the self. This insight gave me stability, and gradually my inner peace returned. I knew that in finding the mandala as an expression of the self, I had attained what was for me the ultimate. Something so very simple about that circle in front of you, and something it's so confined, and it has no expectations whatsoever. And your left brain, conscious mind relaxes, and the right gets to talk to you and tell you where you're at. Oops. Okay. I have a little guided meditation here. And its purpose is for all of us to just relax and center before I do share my letters. And I wanted to create a space in which we could feel comfortable saying, hey, profound experiences that are usually outcast, you can hang out and be with us. And I want to tell you, I'm not going to ask anyone, hey, you want to share a NTE or an Effable experience? I won't. But I wanted to set a feeling and an energetic support for these experiences. They usually don't get invited to presentations, let alone conversations, because they don't fit in the slim confines of our 5 physical senses reality. So we start. Have you take a few deep cleansing breaths and find your most comfortable position. And as you inhale deeply, become aware of any tension in your body and release it with each breath, breathing in peace and letting your breath take any tension. Breathing in peace, breathing out tension. You can bring your awareness to your center, which is right behind your belly button, sometimes just below. And as you breathe, let yourself just be right there in your center. Just take a moment there to be present to that feeling of centering, just like a mandala within your body, that center point in the wholeness all around. And if you can just put out the intention for a color that goes with your center today, just let that color come to you. And all of us have experienced our things like this differently, some visually, some sense or know it, feel it, some even hear it. Just let that color come to you. And now with your breath, let that color of your centering expand. Let it fill your whole body, out to the tips of your fingers, down to your toes, the top of your head. And with your breath, allow your center color to expand out through your energy body. And if you're comfortable, take another deep breath. You can expand your centering color out through space and time to the interconnection of us gathered here on Zoom this morning. And envision your centering color swirling along the interconnections with a menagerie of colors shared by each of us here this morning. Now, centered within ourselves and interconnected, envision our collective colors creating a safe zone, a welcoming space for outcast, numinous, transpersonal experiences, a place of non-judgment, of curiosity and acceptance. And in this safe space we've created, I invite you to ask your NTEs to join us. Again, no worries. I won't ask anyone to share them. If you're comfortable, you can just let them know that they're welcome to be with us this morning. Let them know that we're in the field of transpersonal psychology, and they're welcome here. We find them interesting and worthy of our presence and our attention. I feel that safety and that lovely swirl of energy. Thank you, everyone, sending colors out. I am going to be reading excerpts from each of the chapters. That some of the chapters have 1 letter, some have 2. Once in a while, I'm going to throw in a little insight or a little bit about research. But if you look at the slide here, there's a quotation above the mandala, and those are from J.R.R. Tolkien, who was my son Kevin's very favorite author. He read the books over and over and named his pets the characters' names. And I think of J.R.R. Tolkien as Gavin's great spiritual teacher when he was on Earth.
Yes. Will you read the quotes out loud, because they go into the pictures of ourselves? We can't see the whole quote. At least I can't.
Oh, yes, I'll read the quotes. Don't go where I cannot follow. And that is from the Two Towers. This first chapter is not an NTE, but it sets up for becoming NTEs. Dear Sona, the first day of life without you in it, I spent doing what I thought you would do if one of us died suddenly and tragically. I cleaned the house. Profound grief can shake the memory as if it were a snow globe. But I remember with absolute clarity cleaning the bathrooms, scrubbing the toilets, the bathtubs, the sinks, the baseboards, and most of all, I remember shining the mirrors. It was as if I was making sure there wasn't a spot anywhere to obscure my view of the truth of you. Perhaps the mirrors were like the outside of the glass shell of the snow globe. I was making sure nothing obstructed our view, anyone's view, not even God's. I didn't want to run away, not physically or mentally, and not even from the unbearable pain. I knew that only in the truth could I be with you. Only the truth could keep you alive. There's another memory that settled in mind from the day after you left the earth. I walked through the living room to empty the bathroom trash and froze. Draped across the sectional were your brother, his then fiance, your sister, and your wife. Had they died too, I thought. They didn't move or say a word. The color of their skin I remember most. There was no pink, no orange, no colors of life. I stood for a long moment just looking at them. They didn't look at me. I don't think they knew I was there. Out into the garage I went, threw the trash into the bin, and wondered if they would survive, if we would survive. Always, Mom. And I'm going to read just a little segment from the Insight. It must have been around midday when I made a decision that would direct the rest of my life. I don't remember the exact time, but I remember knowing I couldn't do what I wanted to, which was to go to bed, pull the covers over my head, and never get up. I had just gotten out of bed 9 months before, after years of living homebound with a Parkinsonian condition and severe autonomic dysfunction. Long at last, with a diagnosis and medicine to treat it, I was independent for the first time in over a decade. If I went back to bed, I felt with certainty that it would be the end of not only me, but our family. I'm an introvert, which means I need my time alone to process and recover from life on Earth. I knew that first day that the only way I was going to survive this, that our family could survive this, was for me to take my grief outward. Chapter 2, The Return. Frodo, I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened. Gandalf. So do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what we do with the time that is given us. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings. Dear Sona, and before I start, can everyone hear me okay? Yes? I woke up in the earliest hours, the second morning after you took your life, to a presence a few feet above me and to your voice without sound. There is no time or space here, you told me. Everyone remembers backwards, Mom, but some of us remember forward and outside of time and space. You got sick when you bought your new car because you remembered driving in it with Dad and Corey when the coroner called. Then my son showed me scenes all through our life. You showed me scenes all through our life when you and I unconsciously remembered forward to the day you died. I understood that our having the ability to remember the future was important for me to know. I felt your warmth, your peace, your excited joy, a joy I knew so well from all the Christmas mornings when you'd wake us up with it. I opened my eyes, and our room was alit in golden light and divine beings. In its warmth, I floated with you in what I could only call a sea of grace and infinite love and pure peace. To be in the agony of grief and a sea of grace with my son who just died, I can't find words to describe my emotions. I knew that wherever we were, you were alive. Alive and outside of space and time and in mom and dad's room. I knew that we were home, our true home. You had gone home and brought home back to us. I wondered in the days that followed if every child who dies comes back in grace to soothe the grieving parent. I wondered if it was a secret. Why hadn't I heard of or read about this phenomenon? I didn't know of anyone who had lost a child to ask. And I have a second excerpt. Let me see if yes, okay. This is a second letter. Dear Sona, about a week after your memorial, when I was meditating, which I started to do that week, I heard, Mom, I'm a shaman. I'm a priest. I didn't know what a shaman was. It would take almost 10 years for me to understand that you were informing me that your soul is truly a shaman's soul, and that you are truly my shaman teacher and healer. A couple weeks later, 2 nights in a row, I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning to unusual visions, a slideshow of approximately 100 close-up snake faces. I learned that snakes have faces as unique as humans do. My phobia of snakes before this experience was overwhelming. Just a few weeks before your death, your sister Lena and I took a walk together along the river, and a harmless, not so big snake crossed our path. To my horror, my phobia took over as my motherhood receded. With my heart pounding in fear, I pulled your sister between me and the snake. Yesterday, Corey and I walked into the reptile store to buy his long-wanted pet snake, a pastel ball python. He held her, who he named She, while I stood next to him without a drop of fear. She is living with us now. And I am Elise. And Corey is the name, the story for Kevin's son. I think I'm going to go through the slides and read the letters. That's what's feeling right now, rather than going to the insights and the research. That sound?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm kind of sensing. We can go back to any of those other things. This is chapter 3, sudden mediumship. And the quote is, "What do you fear, lady?" Aragorn asked. "A cage," Eowyn said, "to stay behind bars until use and old age accept them, and all chance of doing great deeds is gone beyond recall or desire." From the Lord of the Rings. Dear Sona, up until a week after you took your life, my numinous transpersonal experiences were all with you. Then I went to my grief counselor. I'd already had the appointment set as I was seeing her for a different loss. Dad came with me because he needed support in his loss of you. I sat across from Natalie on her soft blue sofa. Dad, feeling anxious, paced behind me. I don't remember a lot because in my state of grief and presence and supersensitivity, if all was quiet, I easily slipped into a meditative state of mind. I remember Natalie sitting across from me. I closed my eyes for a moment. Suddenly, I felt a flood of grace and my mind's eye filled with beautiful images. I saw 2 images of flames, gold-orange flames against a peacock blue background. One was tall and older. His inner flame was teal blue. The other was small and younger, her inner color magenta. I knew Natalie's dad had passed recently and that he was the older soul, and the younger, smaller soul was a young female in their family. Like in your first after-death visit, Sona, I felt in a sea of grace. I told Natalie about the two spirits in my mind's eye. She nodded encouragement. I saw horses, and Natalie told me, yes, she died in a horse race. 5 years ago, she fell off of a horse. That was the only time I ever felt my husband question my sanity. And I remember walking back to our car. We left not long after I had this experience. And he really did. And he told me, yeah, that was my moment of going, what are we going to do with this now? Mediumship, and even the name mediumship, I have learned, it meets a lot of skepticism. And even in our field of consciousness and transpersonal psychology, I think it really is going to take having research come out and show, yes, definitely the mind and brain are separate, and consciousness survives physical death before mediums can really just do their work with understanding and more appreciation. Anyway, suddenly, mediumship. And I have, let's see, I'm going to stay here for a minute. Just a joyful mediumship letter with Sona that I'm going to read with you. This process in my culminating project brought me so much I had so much shame around being a medium. And where this brought me was the joy, the initial joy of getting to be a channel of divine energy and watching the brilliance of the spiritual world in reaching out to their loved ones and letting them know what they wanted them to know. So this is just a fun one. And my favorite, this is one of Aunt Mari. It's Sona's aunt. And she is a very sensitive person. And she did a lot of practicing with me. So this is, Dear Sona, please bear with me as I remember another joyful mediumship experience the first year after you left the earth. This project is showing me how much I love being able to use my mediumship ability for the highest good. I smile remembering mediumship with Aunt Mari, sharing it with Aunt Mari. She helped train me by practicing with me. This event happened the summer before I began reading professionally. It was Grandma's final summer on Earth. Aunt Mari was in big grief for you, Sona, and for Grandma. After Grandma was diagnosed with terminal cancer, the Kuhn family met in Tahoe, her favorite place in the world. We had a great time. Dad and I drove the long trek back to Idaho. It was just him and I then. Corey hadn't come to live with us yet. We'd been driving less than an hour when I began to be aware of the presence of a man in spirit in my third eye. I described him to your dad. He told me it sounded like their family friend, Bob Summers. I shared with your dad what Bob told me about himself and the military facility he worked at, filled with airplane hangars, and a shelf in a 70s paneled room with airplane models. Dad said he loved to check out Bob's airplane models, and they inspired him and Grandpa to get into airplane models himself. We felt grateful to have time with his lovely spirit. Our minds turned to other avenues as we finished the drive home. About a week later, Aunt Mari called. We chit-chatted, and then she said, "Hey, is there any chance you might have heard from Bob Summers?" I was quietly stunned and answered, as a matter of fact, we did on the way home from Tahoe. Aunt Mari fell to her kitchen floor. When she composed herself, she told me that when she got back home from Tahoe, she went to the cemetery to visit the graves of her godmother and her grandparents and stopped by Bob's grave, which was nearby. and she said to him, "If Anisha's abilities are real, please go to her." Then in my third eye, I saw Mari standing at a grave I knew was Bob's, and I heard with clairaudience, "I like your laugh too." I told her that Bob says he likes her laugh too. She gasped again and told me that before she left his graveside, she told him she loved his laugh and missed it. Chapter is my shaman, my son. Never laugh at live dragons. That's from The Hobbit. And in my training as a shamanic practitioner, which I am in the midst of, I've learned to journey, which is a way to spiritually travel through altered states of consciousness. It's a wonderful way to explore the spiritual world, which I call non-ordinary reality. And it's a wonderful place to go for divination. That's collecting information that you need to know, and healing. And in this next letter, I want to let you know, so within non-ordinary reality is the lower world, which is very nature-y, animals and plants and spirit guides, but animal spirit guides and very earthy human spirit guides. And the upper world is very etheric spirit guides. In the middle world, it's the energy of this physical world. That's the toughest energy, the toughest world there. I tell you this, I didn't know any of this at this time this letter was into with Sona. So, dear Sona, you taught me about dragons. I remember when your spirit first guided me to the lower world of non-ordinary reality. In the months following your physical death, you often brought me there. I didn't know then that it was the lower world of shamanism, the unseen world of non-ordinary reality. That knowledge wouldn't come until 2014, 2 years after you left the earth, when I seriously began to learn about shamanism. At first, our visits together in the lower world, where you would take me, were beside a lake in the middle of a forest. We'd sit together on the bank and just be. One day, a beautiful sea turtle came to shore in front of us. You encouraged me to get on her back and swim with her around the lake. I was afraid to, but in your watchful eye, I did. We met on the bank of this lake with sea turtle about once a week for a few months. Each time I'd sit a while with you and then swim circles in the lake with turtle. Each ride we'd go deeper into the water until we were in the depths of the lake and I was breathing under the water. As time went on, I journeyed alone in the lower world to meet you. One day I walked through the forest and came to the shore across from our meeting place. I gazed at a mound of sand with sea turtle written above it. It was her grave. I experienced such grief for my precious guide, who helped me become comfortable in my inner depths, who brought me to the shore of my unconscious and let me know it was safe there. You stood by me, Sona, as I cried for sea turtle. Then I turned around and went back to ordinary reality. But not long after, your consciousness came to visit me and asked me to follow you into the lower world again. This time we went to a different location. We walked through a less forested area to a fortress filled with life forms and noise. You told me to wait outside while you went in, and I waited. I looked down through the walls made of smooth, narrow tree trunks and saw someone hand you a box. Then you came up the stairs and out and handed me the box wrapped in a wide blue ribbon. I removed the ribbon, lifted the lid, and inside I found an adorable baby dragon. Sona, you knew my great fear of reptiles and my fearful nature that would not have been comfortable receiving a full-grown, lumpy-bumpy, scaled, fire-breathing flying dragon. You gave me the perfect gift at that exact time, a dragon I could find adorable, a baby who could grow up with me as I grew up. Dragon became my guide and protector in the shadows of my unconscious worlds. He became my friend who encouraged and supported my transformational work. Always, Mom. What the power animal retrieval on the slide there. What Sona did before I even knew about shamanism is what a shaman would do working with a person for healing, is to empower them. And power animal retrieval, a shaman will go into non-ordinary reality to, in the lower world, retrieve a person's power through their power animal. So that really worked amazingly for me. It took me a long time to understand that. What I also learned from what Sona was doing is that he was a tutelary spirit. This is from Ross Heaven, the late Ross Heaven was a shaman. That some spirits, when they cross over to the spiritual world, and I like to call that spiritual world the grace field, because in my after-death visit, my spiritual awakening, it's what I felt with such grace, and I felt like I was in a field of grace. So you'll hear me say that sometimes, grace field. That some of those spirits, advanced spirits, will choose to come back to Earth to guide humans. They usually have very compassionate hearts because they understand how tough it is on this Earth. So I understand that my son is a tutelary spirit, and I know he guides others as well, the shaman. And I learned about this in this project through Maharaji was, if you know the spiritual teacher Ram Dass, was his guru. And after Maharaji passed, he is he's experienced all over the world and guiding many people as their guru. And Philemon was the guru of Carl Jung's, who he was trying to understand whether it was an archetype or a real spirit. But he worked with him for a long time and wrote a book with what Philemon taught him. There's a shaman in my readings named Otavia Alves Pimentel Barbosa. Her brother became her spirit guide, and she said he would guide whoever she asked him to, whoever needed help. And Phyllis Clay's dissertation is on, she found very mentally healthy 12 people who had been guided and are being guided by people in the guides and teachers in the spiritual world. And I really feel like it's such an incredibly underused resource, are the amazing intelligence and wisdom and expertise that we each have, that it's every single one of us has, that all we have to do is kind of become aware and say, hey, are you out there, guidance? I could use some help with this, or I'd like to get to know you. So it's been a real joy to know my son's spirit in this way. He's as my teacher, whole different role. Chapter 5, I call Sun Orchid, and I'll read. This is from The Hobbit. Hobbits are an unobtrusive but very ancient people, more numerous formerly than they are today. For they love peace, quiet, and good tilled earth. A well-farmed countryside was their favorite haunt. Dear Sona, your beloved daycare teacher, Yaya, shared a story about you that always makes me smile because it showed your soulful essence and extreme sensitivity. At 2, you were tiny in the 10% of height and weight. Your hair was golden blonde, thick and straight, framing your dark brown eyes. You and Yaya and the daycare kids were playing at the far end of Yaya's property, a long way from the school and the parking lot. She told me that she looked up and saw tiny you trucking across the long stretch of grass and basketball court all by yourself towards a very old man who was waving to them. She watched you reach him, take his hand, and lead him all the way back across the vast lawn and basketball court to her and the kids. This was only a week or so after you were almost kicked out of Yaya's daycare. You took so long to adjust that Yaya said, I will give you one more day, but if he doesn't adjust tomorrow, this is probably not the right place for him. You must have sensed this deadline. For the next day, you joined them. You took a leadership place among the kids and have never struggled there again. Often, highly sensitive children like you are judged as shy or not social, but actually, you're just taking your time to observe, to figure out the subtle complexities of the environment, the relationships of the people, and learning where you fit in. Kevin had the trait of high sensitivity. 15% of humans have the genetic trait of high sensitivity. I would imagine a greater percentage of humans at Atlantic University have the trait of high sensitivity. This trait, Elaine Aron is the one who brought it out into awareness in the 1990s. Depth of processing, I have greater depth of processing, heightened overstimulation, emotional reactiveness, and sensing of the subtle. And children who are highly sensitive have very different needs. They don't need a lot of discipline, and they need very gentle discipline. They need gentle and calm most of the time. They need a lot of time for transitioning. They need time to talk about deep things and ask deep questions. And our world right now isn't set up for sensitive children. I created a term called sun orchids because I have an hypothesis that those in the highly sensitive, the percentage that is the highest is extremely sensitive. Or I'm calling a sun orchid because a sun orchid is a highly, highly sensitive orchid. Orchids have very particular needs. It's what in the field of high sensitivity they call highly sensitive orchids because of their particular needs, and thriving when they have their needs met and wilting when they don't have them met. So I hypothesize that my son is a sun orchid and that those who are great psychics and mediums and shaman and soulful inspirers and spiritual teachers are also sun orchids. And I did a direct study in 2020 with Rachel Mann as my mentor. She's also my second reader. She was wonderful. The hypothesis that sun orchids are the spiritually talented. And I found biographies and autobiographies of Edgar Cayce and Eileen Garrett, Yogananda, Krishnamurti, Inga Swan, Eckhart Tolle. I found as much information about childhood as I could to look for traits of high sensitivity, and found so many across the board, which supported my hypothesis. Bianca Acevedo is another expert in high sensitivity, and she mentioned in one of her books that she thinks it also includes heightened sensitivity of the subtle energetic body. So to me, these sun orchids, as children, people, energy awareness and energy care are absolutely crucial, and self-care in general. I have another excerpt here that goes with chapter 5 on sun orchids. Dear Sona, on your 25th birthday, 9 months sober, 1 month before your relapse, 5 months before your suicide, you stood in our living room in front of the fireplace, and with your big dark brown eyes looking into mine, whispered, "Mom, I see demons." I imagine how much courage it took for you to tell me that. I stood there facing you, first with silence, then in nervousness, saying something I don't remember at all. Whatever it was, it came from my terror that what you told me meant you had schizophrenia. In my mind, this was a nightmare of a fate for you, my precious son. In this moment, frozen in time in my memory, I failed you. On the afternoon of your last birthday of your short life, I failed you. Always, Mom. And this is something so important to me, is that we start knowing what to say, that having spiritual experiences, whether they are blissful, like my awakening was, or they are scary, that they can be talked about, and brought into the light. And we can have experts who are shaman and clairvoyants and who can look into the person's energy and work with their energy. And of course, there's all kinds of elements, like for Kevin, who dealt with addiction, when you take drugs for a long time, can lower your vibration. And this is what I would share with my son now. That makes sense that you see demons, honey. You've had a lot of years of drug use. That's going to make holes in your aura. It can lower your vibration so much that with your sensitivity to spirit, you're attracting energies that are low in vibration and consciousness. It's very important to my heart, high sensitivity and extreme sensitivity. Chapter 6, In Two Worlds. Quote from Tolkien, "In sorrow we must go, but not in despair. Behold, we are not bound forever to the circles of the world, and beyond them is more than memory." Dear Sona, I felt nervous when Grandma and I sat down on the blue sofa in Grandma and Grandpa's family room. I remember describing an apartment on a second floor. And I want to stop for a minute and give a little bit of background that this is with my Sona's grandma, my mother-in-law, who has terminal cancer. And I felt very, very hesitant about this, but I felt very encouraged by spirit, the importance of it. I was reading slowly and kept taking deep, slow breaths to relax so I could read clearly. Soon Grandma told me that I was describing the apartment she grew up in. Aunt Bridget's spirit had brought us through the apartment into a bathroom. I described it to Grandma. Yes, she told me, that's where the bathroom was, and it did have a clawfoot tub in the middle. And then I pointed to my pinky toe. My pinky toe had all my focus, as did the image in my third eye of blood on the bottom of the tub. I told Joan of the blood as I pointed to my pinky toe. She gasped and was quiet for a long time. And then she said, I never told anyone this story. It happened when I was 7. My Aunt Bridget had taken a bath. I went to use the bathroom and saw blood in the tub. I called my mom. She knew it was Bridget's, and the blood meant she wasn't getting any better. She'd been sick, and her bleeding pinky toe was a part of it. They brought her to the hospital that night, and she died there a few days later. Once it connects spiritually with another, a spiritual pathway seems to be laid between me and the individual. Suddenly, I began to have more transpersonal experiences related to Grandma. A week after our reading with Aunt Bridget, I was meditating and found myself in the presence of a new spirit. She let me know she was Mary, Grandma's mom, your great-grandma. Mary died tragically in a car accident, driving home to Chicago with her husband and daughter after visiting Grandma and Grandpa and baby Uncle Tom. They were driving up a hill in Kansas when a driver passing in the opposite direction hit them head on. Mary and her daughter were killed at the scene and her husband seriously injured. The accident was such a traumatic loss, there was an unspoken rule in the family that it not be mentioned. I knew little about it other than what I've shared here. On this morning, while I was meditating, Mary nodded to me to follow her. She brought me into the car just before the accident. I experienced the accident as if I was Mary. Sitting in the passenger seat, I looked down at my legs through Mary's eyes and saw the small check pattern of my pants. I wore a scarf around my hair. There was a folded newspaper lying on the seat between my husband and me. My daughter was sitting in the back seat behind my husband. And suddenly, without warning, a car slammed into us. And now I began experiencing the accident. I flew out the front window, bounded off the hood, and landed on the side of the road, where I lay aware for about 2 minutes before I took my last breath. Now outside of her body, I saw my daughter stuck and squeezed between the back and the front seat. I saw my husband conscious but in great pain, stuck between the front seat and the steering wheel. He sat in the silence of the death of his family and waited a long time until the ambulance arrived. After my first experience at the accident with Mary, I called Grandma, told her that her mother's spirit was with me, and she'd just taken me through the accident experience. I asked if she wanted me to share this with her, and she said yes, without hesitation. She confirmed that the pants her mother was wearing indeed had the pattern I saw, and that her sister had been sitting behind her dad, and that her dad was stuck and conscious until the ambulance arrived. But she didn't understand her mother being on the side of the road. That's wrong, she told me. She was found on the hood of the car. Grandma sounded frustrated and told me she was going to call her brother and then call me back. She called me back about 15 minutes later. Her brother also thought her mother's body was found on the hood of the car. Joan has asked him to dig up the accident report. To both of their surprise, it said their mother's body was found on the side of the road. This evidence also helped Joan know her family and spirit was actively reaching out to her. You opened the door, Sona. You connected your family to our greater spiritual reality, generations of it. Always, Mom. Going back over the memories of these experiences with my mother-in-law and her mother, I understand that in this life, she was an incredibly ethical person. She was an elementary school teacher. She was so ethical, and I realized spirit really has an ethic. She only showed me information related to her. She didn't go and show me what any more than the very basics about her husband and her daughter. And I realized that that is the ethics of spirit. It kind of relates to, I had a download. This would happen a lot after my sudden spiritual awakening, a download sometimes of information. And I had one of soul DNA. And the purpose was, Sona was telling me how he could be in many places at the same time, because the little particles of energy hold all the information of his uniqueness. So he can be in the grace field, the spiritual world, and which is where some of our energy always remains. And he can be in a different incarnation, and he can be at a reading with a beloved because of soul DNA. And I love to put it together with quantum string theory, quantum physics for many of us, right, in this field of interest. It's amazing because these experiences that we have that don't fit into the basic understanding of mainstream science and quantum theory, it has room for them. And string theory is quite amazing because it looks at things so differently, that the fundamental elements of us, of the universe, of everything, it's not particles, it's strings, little tiny threads that are like little rubber bands. And what I love about it is the uniqueness is in the vibration, not in its components, but in the vibration itself. So it's the tension and the manner of the vibration make the uniqueness of an electron. And we're electron systems. So it works for us too, string theory. And in mediumship, how I experience spirit, and we all do differently, is a whole lot of vibration. I know when a spirit's with me by its vibration. And so I love string theory in relative to mediumship and being with the spirit world. Chapter 7 is a conscious cosmos. The quote from Tolkien is, "There are no safe paths in this part of the world. Remember, you're over the edge of the wild now and in for all sorts of fun wherever you go." And this was a letter I wrote to Sona, in which I put a lot of the things that are hard to talk about. So, "Dear Sona, not long after your transition to spirit, when your energy neared mine, you like to walk out under the night sky and look up at the same two stars. A homesickness would flow through me that was not mine, and I knew that through the path of the two stars, you'd known home and a life there lived in its full cycle, in which you worked with fulfillment, watched your kids grow up, and your grandchildren too. Once while I was giving a reading, emerged not in a manifestation of human form, slightly bigger in height and stature, with a larger head. His forehead was encircled with rounded bumps. His face was rugged, his neck thick. But he wore clothes made of cottony, flowing cloth. And he scared me, and I told him to go away, that I didn't know him and I wasn't ready to communicate with him. I learned to test new spirits for at least 2 weeks in their presence. I told them to back off and give me a whole lot of distance, and I observed them. I made sure they'd come with permission from my gatekeeper, you, Sona, and was straight from the grace field. So 2 weeks after I rejected the spirit in different form, I was taking a walk. I became aware of him close behind me. He spoke softly and gently. "You know, my people lived on our planet, in our galaxy long ago, and we face problems not dissimilar to yours. We reach out to share what we know, to be of help." And then I understood, and my mind shifted again. The spirits who reach out are souls, energies that have lived in bodies, whether trees or plants or animals on Earth or in physical form somewhere else in the universe. They are a unique eternal consciousness wanting to communicate. I later learned from him that he's from Andromeda, our neighbor. I learned it's important to be kind and gracious to new spirits and to test them at the same time. It was in a past life memory that I met my guide from a different dimension. I was a teenage Native American boy in the mountains of North America, looking for herbs in the aspen grove with my beloved spiritual guide. We both had our heads bent down towards Mother Earth, gathering sweet fern leaves to make a salve for skin rashes and burns. She was Sasquatch. Her energy was pink, and I loved her. Her dimension, her frequency was heightened far beyond ours, as was the level of her consciousness and her knowing. Another realm that I found so interesting and blew me away is the fairy realm. I didn't want anything at all to do with the fairy realm. And then I was with another medium, and sometimes that makes your vibrations even higher and more sensitive to subtle energy. And we had a male fairy, older male fairy with glasses who loved science. And that was probably the only way I could take that seriously. And later I learned about the fairy dimension, right, which is very garden and plant and science and even technical. There's some technical in it. But the fairy realm is very active and all over nature. Chapter 8, Remembering Forward. Quote from Tolkien, "Go back, he thought. No good at all. Go sideways, impossible. Go forward, only thing to do. On we go." So up he got and trotted along with his little sword held in front of him, in one hand feeling the wall, in his heart all a patter and a pitter. From The Hobbit. Dear Sona, I had 2 precognitive waking vision experiences in the 2 months before you took your life. The first came out of my choice to buy a car. I could drive again after 7 years of not being able to. The evening I picked it out and started the official buying process, I felt sick enough to go to bed at 6 in the evening. When Dad asked me why I was in bed so early, I told him that I felt like, in buying the car, that I'd killed you. In the message in your first after-death communication, you corrected me. You told me I felt sick because I remembered the coroner calling Dad while we were driving on our way home from picking Corey up from daycare. My second precognitive vision experience, Dad and I were in our room. He was changing his clothes to go for a walk, and I was waiting, looking out the window at the ponds behind our home, when a bang sounded out and the whole house shook. Get down, I yelled to Dad. Kevin's shooting at us. Dad came over to me. I was flat on the bedroom floor shaking. Niche, it was a bird that flew in the window. Kevin died a month later by gunshot. Precognition, what a subject, because a whole lot of us have precognitive experiences, premonitions, which are just like a sense that something might happen. And I did my research from a real perspective of my experiences with Kevin and my experiences as somebody who has heightened psychic ability. So I want to start with so I took the elements here that seem to explain maybe my precognitive experience before Kevin died. We'll start with pre-sentiment research. Is really fascinating, where they hook the subject up so they can measure their skin. This particular research study, they measured skin conductance, and hooked up, they then showed them images, and some of them with big emotional triggers, upsetting or happy or in between. And the body reacted long before the image. The body responded to a heavily emotional image, way over a calm image, and responded before. And then there is quantum entanglement. So Kevin and I, being mother and son, are quantum entangled. Anyone who we are closely connected to, we are in the field of life. If they are way across the universe and something happens, it will have some kind of a response on us, no matter what. And the impact, the information that goes from one to the other is at faster than the speed of light. So if you are quantum entangled with someone, I think we have a much greater chance of having precognitive experiences related to that person. And then Jung has a fascinating gradient theory that he uses to, he was talking about how somebody can suddenly be in a place that transcends time and space, to have synchronicities and numinous experiences. And his gradient theory is that under tons of stress, the conscious mind kind of loses its activity, mellows out, and the unconscious mind activates. And between the two, a gradient now goes from the unconscious to the conscious mind, and with it, information from the unconscious mind, and opens that the spheres of outside of time and space. And I really feel like that's, for me, what happened before Kevin died, because these were two of them. I had a lot more even, where I was just quantumly entangled. So it's happening to him, I'm experiencing in some way, and the gradient from the unconscious carrying a really emotionally terrible event. My whole body started to respond to that, my whole system. But it's, I think, a real important part of humanity that we understand this, because if enough people are having, we can take our experiences seriously and act on them, and maybe even share if a lot of us are having the same visions about somebody, put them together. And I have, let's see. This is chapter 9, and it is called Peace, and this is the last chapter. The world is indeed full of peril, and in it there are many dark places, but still there is much that is fair. And though in all lands love is now mingled with grief, it grows perhaps the greater. I remember driving the 25 minutes from downtown Boise to our home in Eagle and experiencing a sudden shift of consciousness. All in my view took on a yellow glow. Emotions overwhelmed me, and I quickly realized they were not mine. They were yours, Kevin. You were with me once again in connection with the grace field, making your last drive. I saw everything as if I was looking at it for the last time. The trees in the golf course to my left, their beauty overwhelmed me, and a gas station, a thrift store to the right, all colors vivid. A duet of awe and sadness vibrated through me as I said goodbye to life. You drove with me, Sona, until I turned towards home, off the course you took to end your life. You showed me what you intended to. You were sad, but you were at peace. You left a message on your brother's answering machine a couple of days before you left the psych ward and took your life. You and Michael had been fighting. Michael played the recording for us the day after you died. Your voice flowed peaceful. We heard in your piece that you had already made the decision to take your life when you called. Michael, I'm sorry, it isn't you. I've been hating myself. It may take a few years to forgive me. I will always, always have your back. My son, I let you go to the peace you found and to the peace you now are. Always, Mom. And I'm thinking this might be a good time to do the questions and answers and is Angie there?
I'm here. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the screen share, and we'll go ahead and open it up to questions and answers. Feel free to do that now while I'm closing out the slide presentation.
You know, I haven't done my reflections and conclusions yet. Let me see. Coming out of that last letter there. I think maybe it might. Should I just go into, Jules, can I ask you for a little help here?
Yes.
Go into the reflections right now and the
Yeah.
conclusion, and then questions and answers.
Yes, that would be wonderful. And I just want to tell you how I got chills so many times during this presentation, and this last chapter piece, I have tears still in my eyes. It was so moving and incredible.
Thank you, Jules. Thank you. Okay, so I'll go to the reflections and the conclusions, and then we'll come back to questions and answers. Thank you for your patience with me. I'm kind of new at this process. Okay, and I'm gonna see. Right, there we go. Okay. These are my reflections on the Culminating project and the process and how it worked for me. What felt most important was, and I didn't see this at first, it was taking one of those boxes out of the cellar, dusty, opening it up and not even knowing what anything in it was other than it's the NTEs I've been trying to avoid. Being able to clean that box out, like you know how necklaces get all wadded up, being able to move the strands of Kevin's death, instant mediumship, and sudden spiritual awakening. Separate them and look at them one by one. And Atwater says it well. Only by separating the various aspects from the whole can we be certain of what we think exists. we can then study, examine, and observe. And I started with grief. That's what came up first, was I had had such an unusual experience. I did grieve a lot, and I had many days and days in a row when I had no spiritual connection, and I grieved and I grieved and I grieved. But it was so unusual and a long time that Sona was with us that I know I missed some grieving places. And that's what came up in this project, was there was more grief to be done. And it was amazing to get to be with my son in my memories, in his spirit, and really grieve and let him go in a different way. It's a different layer of grief, but it felt really right. And it's really something, the part of, in this process of understanding him as this soul who is beyond me, and being able to teach me, about shamanism and guide me is really been something. Reflection on being a clear channel for spirit. So whether it's mediumship or shamanism or channeling or healing, letting that shame go and the embarrassment. And I thank Jules so much. And Nicole Flowers was a writing advisor first semester. And she also received my stories. And that elimination of shame and embarrassment brought back just my joy and my love and my calling. And understanding that having that ability is a part of your nature, just like the genetic trait that it's associated with in my hypothesis of high sensitivity, extreme sensitivity. And then the sudden spiritual and psychic awakening. This was something I really needed to learn a lot about. And I did research on spiritual emergency. I always wondered, did I have a spiritual emergency? And I learned that I avoided that thanks to, I had most of the factors that Harry talks about is needed in healing from spiritual crisis and overwhelm, which is people around you who aren't judging you and who take you at face value and have a belief that you're in the middle of something that's positive. My family didn't know what I was going through, and they didn't have the language of spirituality, but they had a faith in me and that my abilities were real and that I was truly bringing Kevin with us, his spirit. And I'm so grateful for that. What was really hard is not knowing a language for what you're going through. I didn't know, and even my counselors, nobody had the language of spiritual emergency or sudden spiritual awakening or psychic opening. All of that I had to figure out myself, and I could feel very sorry for myself. And through this project, I realized, wow, I had this unique journey in which my son's spirit got to teach me, and this council of guides, I got to be taught by spirit. How amazing. And to really embrace the uniqueness of my journey. Also, the understanding it's given me of how much we need awareness of the soulful and spiritual our society needs, so that people don't have to go through extra hard stuff when they're already going through a lot. And a reflection for the see here, hang on just 1 second. You've noticed in the mandala there's a treasure box. Right after Kevin died, treasure boxes became really important to me because it felt like the life had shattered, like a bomb had fallen on our family's world and our hearts. And a treasure box, like what we could pick up off the ground that we wanted to bring with us forward into life. And I had forgotten about treasure boxes and everything, and they came back up for me in this culminating project. And I started to see, as I was processing all my NTEs, the treasures within them. And I am into treasure boxes again, both metaphoric and real. The gift of Kevin's consciousness continuing on and getting to know that, getting to have my child have the sensitivity that I have, or the ability I have to actually been able to meet his spirit and have him tell me his thoughts, his joy. Another treasure has been understanding Kevin on earth and his decision to leave. After he died, I thought to myself, like, what can I do for him now? It's so permanent. And I thought I can understand him. I can understand him. And I felt like I gained a whole lot of understanding of Kevin through this. Jules, to have someone, and we need a lot more people like this in our world for when people awaken suddenly, unexpectedly, or have just big NTEs that are overwhelming. We need people who know about them, people who can be there for you and listen and guide you. And Jules was that for me these 2 semesters. And without that aspect, I don't think I could have this positive result. And Rachel has been such a part of this journey. My direct study was such a big step in my academics, and she is a mentor, very strong mentor to me. And she was second reader, and she's an amazing editor. So another treasure. And the spirit of Atlantic University. And I realize now that this was my rough draft, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to put the spirit of Atlantic University because it's an NTE. So I'm going to tell you that story, and then I'll read my conclusion here. But I was feeling, this was in 2017, and for about 3 years, Sona was with us, and I was working as a professional medium. And then it stopped because all kinds of life came in. And I think what really happened too is I started a dark night of the soul, which is you have to learn from all of these NTEs how to integrate them right into your life and process them and live with them. And I also become a parent of a 4-year-old, my husband and I, who has medical challenges. And I didn't know what to do with any of this that had happened and all that I had come to know. And I didn't know how it would ever fit in my life. And I put out to the universe, could you please give me some direction, please? I feel so lost. And about 2 weeks later, I woke up to a spirit at the end of our bed, right at my feet, who said, follow Edgar Cayce. Okay, I better go to that ARE site again. And for the first time, and I'd been there a few times to ARE site, but I had never seen Atlantic University's connection there, and the transpersonal psychology master's degree. And I knew that's what that spirit guided me to. And the next day I called, and in that next semester, I started up. And it was amazing to have a place I could learn that had room for me, with my differences and my experiences. And yeah, so these are my treasures that I'm taking from my culminating project. Now we could do questions and answers.
So, well, I want to speak up as the second reader and as somebody a mentor at AU who worked with Anisha on her directed project, which was kind of the first brainstorming semester of how she was going to do this work, and beginning to come to terms and open up to these NTEs. And I want to just thank you, Anisha, for, I mean, I'm in awe for what you've done here, and the tremendous courage and determination and love that it has taken to come to terms with your son's death. I mean, that would be enough to bring most people to their knees, right? And they'd never rise up again. And what you've done here, in being true to your process, and also really honoring Kevin's life and death, is just, it's a miracle. And you are a miracle. You're a miracle in your presence, your authenticity, your intelligence, and your incredible sensitivity. I mean, you're a model to all of us. And though I have worked as a so-called shaman for many years, you have been my teacher. And not only have I learned from the research you did, but I have sat here, particularly in your presentation, and just felt the incredible spirit and power that is within, through, and around you, and that you bring. And it's opened me up. So I just want to honor you and thank you. And I'm sure I may be a good editor, but I just wanted to make sure that you know that beyond the way the turn of my mind goes to making sure, your paper and student papers are as shining as brightly as they can, at the level of writing and at the level of in-text citations, that I am not at all, that is not at all detracting from or the primary focus of, my reception of, your work and who you are. And if anybody in the group wants to read Anisha's paper, it is a beautiful, beautiful, I mean, I can't even begin to tell you the combination of her letters to her son and then the incredibly insightful, very engaging way she brings in the research that she's done, and then the Tolkien quotes. I mean, I'm a huge fan of J.R.R. Tolkien. I mean, I've read the books many times, and then when the movies came out, I swear to God, I must have watched the movies like 100 times when I was going through a dark night of the soul. And it just I really appreciate Kevin's love of Tolkien, and yeah, her paper is tremendous. And I don't even want to just call it a paper. I mean, it's a creative, it's a, what would it be called? It's the essence of a one-woman show that has got all her guides and her son, and, all her guides, her spirit guides, and, with her, sitting on the, and she's engaging with them. It's a very, very, yeah, as I said, I hope you find a way to publish it. So whether it's self-publishing or some other way. So I'm really grateful, and I want to make sure you heard those words from me where you see my face. And unfortunately, I am going to have to run off because I have an appointment I've got to get to in Washington, D.C. So, but I wanted to ask one question, which is that through this process, in reflecting on Kevin's life and the incredible challenge of his life, with his high sensitivity in a world that is just so hard for people with this kind of sensitivity, right? It's hard for all of us, but especially people like Kevin. And then, of course, his struggle with addiction. Did you get a sense of how this particular incarnation and the experiences that he had were part of his soul's choice in terms of the fulfillment of his soul's highest purpose, and his greatest expression? Do you understand what I'm saying in this
I think
question?
I do. And I want to thank you for everything that you have just said and shared. I don't know, I'm going to say that. So how I see, and from my experiences with him, is that he came in to be able to be that, able to live his soul's purpose. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Which knowing him now as a soul, along with in the form of my son,
Mm-hmm.
Someone who furthers consciousness, right, helps healing. But he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it, right? When life between life regressions, I went through the program at Atlantic University. It's wonderful. We decide with our council of guides in the spirit world who are with us eternally. How much energy will I take into this new incarnation? How much energy will I need? How much energy will I leave in the spiritual world? And I often think of Kevin having maybe not taken enough energy with him he also had dyslexia. He had many, many things like that, maybe not enough energy to be able to fulfill. And but what I feel like happened is he was able to find a way to fulfill through his work on the other side. I know he works with much more than me. And when I have had young men come through and young women who have passed of often overdose or something related to addiction. So I feel like what he was going to do, he has stayed kind of near us for a while, that he is continuing his purpose in the spiritual world. So that's I'll think more about that too, and probably understand more as I go here. I don't know.
Would you mind if I offered a little bit of my insight?
Yes, that would be wonderful.
Well, when we connect with the higher consciousness, with our higher consciousness and our soul, what we understand is that the progression of our parallel lives is not broken by leaving bodies. And that when we exist on a soul level, that the soul is wishing to experience itself in multiple forms, multiple experiences, and is experimenting. And, one thing I would say that I would offer that I feel from what you've shared of his story is that, that he is a shaman, and, going through a dark night of the soul is actually part of the shamanic initiation.
Yes.
And struggling with drugs or with psychosis, with an illness that is life-threatening, whether it's a mental illness or a physical illness, is so much part of that initiation. And that there's something about going into that lower world that then brings out the power, right? And so him working from the other side as a shaman is integrally connected to his initiation in this lifetime. And the second is like, don't underestimate. I mean, you've said this a lot, but you are meant to work in this world for whatever time you have here. And his process with you, both in life and after he left this body, is very much a part of giving you that capacity to do that. So, and this probably is
Soul
stuff that
contract is a soul contract.
it's a soul contract. Yeah.
With Sona and Anisha.
Yeah. Powerful one. I mean, you probably know all of this, but I'm just very touched. And yeah. And
Rachel, I've been thinking a lot about that, about the dark nights of the soul, and whether that the suicide can happen in the depths of the dark night of the soul, and how I've been wondering about exactly what you have said. So I'm going to process that in with my own. As we grow, right, we can see new perspectives, new horizons, more of the whole.
Yeah, of course. And suicide is often an act of empowerment. It's stepping into one's power. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yes, I respect very much. I respect his decision.
Yeah, of course.
What he had to do that day.
Yeah.
And sometimes
anyway,
you can feel so helpless in this life that it can feel like you're choosing your soul, right? Maybe I can't make it here, but I'm going to choose my soul.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is there anybody else who has a question or a comment or something they want to share? I realized I did the reflections and then I forgot to read my conclusion. So I think I'm going to, it's from my paper.
Anisha,
Yes.
just for a second, let's let Deanna ask her question or comment.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
I didn't see that.
She raised her hand. You didn't see it.
I am sorry. I am so new to all of this. Sorry, Deanna.
Yes.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you so much for sharing all of that and just taking action. I'm in the dream work class too, and that was the theme, is to take action, and just so much, you just brought so much consciousness out. It was just so amazing to witness it and hear it. And just the immediacy of all of this conversation, just sort of a commentary is, I had my dream work group, and instead of people sort of like delving into dream work, they're coming to the conversation with my best friend's son is visiting me in dreams. I mean, it's like that level, that depth is coming through. And, I'm a newbie to all of this. I mean, my dream world is new, and but I hold the space of the transpersonal, and it's just my passion. But there is this quantum entanglement. So when you said that your son is working with others, and it was, just holding the space to, it is happening out there, and it's just amazing to witness.
Yes, and when you get into groups like you're in, Deanna, it's amazing how it raises up the energy and the vibration and the synchronicities, and that entanglement. And it's something just so powerfully happens with the expansion of consciousness within groups.
And the people joining the dream group, just out of a whim, are leaving going, okay, well, I'm not crazy. I have really important work to do. And it's just, It just takes a little connection.
Yes, and that's so, that's what I feel is so important, is that we can start talking about it. And of course, where we feel safe and where we learn we're safe to talk about it. But I think it's going to make a big difference to bring this spiritual awareness, soulful awareness out.
Well,
Thank you for being here, Deanna, and for sharing.
You're welcome.
We would love to hear your conclusion. Thanks, Deanna. Yeah, that's a really important topic. I might be able to say a few things before we complete.
At the other end of this two-world NTE process, I'm convinced of the importance of fully processing our NTE experiences, starting with talking about them. Being able to put NTEs into words the best we are able does not reduce their wonder or their numinousness or their transformative power. Expressing our experiences brings them into everyday life and into the norms of our culture. It invites the soulful into our Western world that needs it desperately. Finding the meaning within our NTEs, finding personal treasures within them, shows us their purposefulness, the inherent healing properties of our experiences. Integrating the treasure into one's heart and whole being allows the purpose of our NTEs, the personal transformative journey to one's true and highest self, to naturally unfold. Sharing our experiences with one another brings to greater awareness numinous transpersonal experiences as a foundation of the natural journey of human growth and transformation and expanding consciousness. And it's kind of what Deanna had brought up there, to be able to get together and share and feel like we're just human, and
expanding the parameters of our understanding and our communication about and our revelations about and everything else. And we all thank God for Atlantic University, that this is the place where we can do all of these things and become teachers. You know, for myself, I realized over this past year, I'm still teaching teachers, because that's basically all of the students at AU are spiritual teachers going forward, to share all of what you just revealed and uncovered of transpersonal domains of expanded consciousness and multidimensional consciousness and so on.
Yep.
All of that.
I'm very curious if we tested all the students at Atlantic University with the high sensitivity survey, what percentage would be highly sensitive?
I'd like to just, this is a great presentation. But I'd like to get I'm going to mangle your title. First of all, it was something like making the ineffable effable.
Yes.
It's probably said more gently than that. But what I noticed, and this is where I like your take on this. What interested me immediately, what came to mind immediately, was that in both of those words is embedded the word fable. And I believe that human beings are essentially storytellers, and that so we tell one another lots of stories. One of the stories we tell each other these days is about banks failing. And then we tell ourselves the story about quantum mechanics and string theory, and we tell ourselves a whole lot of different stories. I think the word fable tends to get a negative connotation in some sense, like mythology, Ray. But it really is all of these stories are, in some sense, mythologies. And we know that the mythologies that surround us are important to who we are, because they are all attempts to take that thing which we cannot say directly and put it into words. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, I have been Ray's class, the symbols and mythology class, wrote the fairy tale, the personal fairy tale. Very powerful, amazing to look at the symbols and know that this fairy tale can guide you now. Very, very powerful. And I thought that's what I was going to do here. And I think I still could do that. But I think before I could put it into a story form, I had to own it. I had to embrace it, sort through it. And the empowerment came from saying it in my own voice, in my own words, and making it, right, my own story in this life, in the physical. And then now you can go and let the unconscious world work with the conscious and make the stories. And but it is, I guess in this project, I really have told my story, right? And there is power in that. And all of us have amazing stories, unlike anyone else's, right? Unique to tell. So, and I can feel like for me what that, the ineffable to effable, I can feel what that effable is, right? It's, I can feel it from my solar plexus all the way out. I'm no longer kind of shrinking with it all, or the heaviness of it. So that effable is freedom, right? To be able to know our stories, not have to hide any of it, be able to make peace with all of it, embrace it as our own is healing, very healing. And that's what, yes, thank you, Tom. That was very helpful question.